Hello everybody. Today I'm planning to cover the topic of natural immunity against COVID and how it was mistreated and downplayed by academic establishment. Of course, you may say that, well, this case is already kind of mute. Why is it irrelevant? We already passed it. And I would say whether it's relevant or not depends on whether the right lessons have been learned. And from what I see happening right now, I don't feel like the right lessons were learned. Because if you think that you could fix academia by just replacing Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins with people like Kennedy and Jay Bhachmachuraya or whatever his name is, you are wrong. You are very wrong. And I hope that by the end of this video, which will be very long, you understand why. I will try to show you all of the concrete methods and techniques used by people in academia to manufacture the requested consensus. I would like to show you the structure of this propaganda machine, which I tried to outline in the main video of the channel, in this concrete example, because I think this case is very symbolic, and it's, how to say, already, well understood. All the pieces which we need are already in our hands. I would like to start with the video which I found recently, where we see that one of the top doctors admitting basically the conspiracy, the initial conspiracy to downplay natural immunity. I think this video is really good, so I decided to watch it fully here. So it'd be like a reaction on the reaction. So I was really thinking which part would I want to show and which part I don't, and I thought like I don't want to cut anything. I'll start from it, and then we're gonna discuss further.
Dr. Paul Offit, who is a member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, was on CNN yesterday, and RFK Jr. health advisor Callie Means drug him through the mud over vaccines and children's health, exposing his ties to pharmaceutical companies in a very heated back and forth that has gone viral. The fallout from this, though, is actually way more important in what has emerged regarding Offit's role during COVID-19. In this first clip I have for you, Offit explains how the Biden administration knew in 2021 that natural immunity was more effective in preventing serious illness from COVID. So why did they still mandate the vaccine? Well, you're about to see why. And this meeting that he refers to, he exposes exactly who was there in this second clip I have for you and reveals why the government lied to us through these vaccine mandates. Fuse this with the latest Yale study that just came out showing cell damage in individuals caused by the COVID-19 vaccine. And Dr. Deborah Birx explaining to Chris Como how long COVID is similar to HIV. This is critical information that everyone needs to hear. What on earth has been done to us? I'm Zach Costello.
With the mandates for vaccines or mandates for mandating, we leaned into a libertarian left hook, and I think it's really hurt us.
Right, especially with also not taking natural infection into account.
Yeah, I was actually part of a meeting that, I remember that meeting. It was in February 2021. So I guess it was right around the time, no, it was later than that, I think. But in any case, so I can tell you that the administration was considering it. They were considering saying, in this setting, because we're starting to mandate vaccines, if someone comes in a workplace or hospital or whatever and says, I don't want to get vaccinated, but I've been naturally infected, and I think natural infection will prevent me from getting serious disease, therefore I don't want to get a vaccine, there's every reason to believe that natural infection would prevent against serious disease. And the data came out fairly soon showing that that was true. But so the administration, I think for more reasons having to do with bureaucratic concerns, because it's added another layer. You had to now prove that you were naturally infected. You could probably buy, a PCR positivity card off the internet. So you really would have to show that that you had antibodies to, to the viral proteins, and that was just another layer that they just didn't want to consider.
So they knew that it was true that natural immunity was effective in preventing serious illness, and therefore individuals who had already had COVID had no need for the vaccine. But because of bureaucratic concerns and it adding another layer, this was the reason why they didn't tell anyone about it. It gets worse though.
Yeah, just imagine if you don't have COVID vaccine mandate, you wouldn't have this problem. Yeah, the problem only starts if you accept the initial collectivistic premise about the necessity of mandate. And that's how regulations always snowball, right? I'm sure tyrannical regimes like Hitler's ones and Soviet Union's ones, they also didn't want to be tyrannical towards workers. They only wanted to be tyrannical towards, evil corporations, but you can't really stop. And we see what happened.
That meeting that he refers to there, listen to this.
In February of 2022, I was asked with 3 other immunology virology types to participate in a conference call about whether or not natural infection should count as a vaccine. In other words, if for those areas that were still mandating vaccine, which was many in early 2022, whether they should be able to say, look, here, I was naturally infected here. This should serve as my vaccine card. And that meeting was held with Rochelle Walensky, Tony Fauci, Vivek Murthy from Surgeon General's office, and Francis Collins. And then
just remember those names, right? They will be the key conspirators, in our story.
Me and 3 other immunology virology doctors. So he started off, he said, let's introduce ourselves. So, Tony Fauci says, I'm Dr. Tony Fauci from NIID, and then Rochelle Walensky says, I'm Rochelle Walensky from CDC. I said, we know who you are. And the question is, who the hell are we, right? They probably didn't need to introduce themselves. In any case, we voted on it, and it was sort of 2-2, basically. I mean, I was one of I think natural infection should count for obvious reasons. I mean, actually, you're making immune response to all 4 viral proteins. You, in many ways, make a broader cytotoxic T-cell response. I think you're better off in many ways. The problem with natural infection is...
There are some theoretical arguments for natural immunity to be better. Yeah, he is giving them in principle.
It's misnamed. It should be called survivor-induced immunity because not everybody lives with a natural infection. So, that was. I wish we had then immediately gone to the press and said, "Look, here's the conversation we just had. Here's the conversation that we went back and forth on this." Because while we all basically agreed, I think that it should count. That the question was bureaucratically would it work at a time when people could just go on the internet and say, "Look, I've been naturally infected," and get out of it. It's just. It became a bureaucratic issue. So I saw Dr. Fauci at a meeting maybe a year ago or so, because I was already getting out there saying I think we should target high-risk groups, where I was getting a lot of pushback from public health people who felt that I had gotten off the bus. Because, see, that was the whole feeling in this. You're either on the bus or off the bus, and there was no in between. So,
yeah, you see the term he uses. Yeah, you either bend your knee to the mainstream or you're out. That's what I was trying to explain previous time. In fact, there is a book called The Penalty of Evil about how the Holocaust has happened. And it's a similar, collective phenomena. You kind of either on the bus or you're out. And if you're on the bus, you better jump higher than everybody else. Because, if you don't do it, someone else will do it, and you'll have high positions in the career. We see a similar phenomena here. This person, as you can see, he wasn't actually even supportive of this proposal, but yet he went along with it.
So I said, Tony, am I wrong? Am I wrong in making it? He said, no, you're right. We should target high-risk groups. He said, the problem is, the minute you say that, it becomes a nuanced message. And a nuanced message is a garbled message. If you really want to make sure those groups get vaccinated, then you recommend it for everybody. And okay, so if we think that,
well, that's what I've noticed even myself, that Anthony Fauci was always emphasizing this concept of simple messages, which was utterly wrong. Obviously, everyone's personal situation is different, and he should be able to make his own healthcare decisions. And in fact, this attitude is what precisely what pushes so many people away from the narrative. I've seen so many comments on the internet, on Reddit, everywhere, which looked exactly the same. People are saying, as soon as they start saying that natural immunity doesn't exist, I started thinking that they're lying to us. This means they're lying to us probably somewhere else as well, and that's how my trust in this whole narrative fell apart. So that's what these technocrats always fail to take into account, that people could use their mind, could use the reasons to figure out the truth. They treat people as some sort of mindless herd and think they know better, when in reality, of course, they know worse.
I should say it, because my personal thinking on this is, if that's the reason we're vaccinating healthy 16-year-old boys, that's not a good reason. And just have it open, say it openly. You know what I'm saying? Because I think people are smart enough to hear it.
You know what I'm wondering as I'm listening to that? Why didn't Offit say anything at the time? Why is this coming out years later? And you know, because our overlords decided that because there was nuance, you were too stupid to understand that guidance. Blanket vaccine mandates and lying about natural immunity was the way instead. And to think, this man just got pardoned by Joe Biden. They forced this poison onto us knowing many didn't even need it. And when I say poison, this is exactly what I mean. Alex Berenson posted this very urgent preprint of a study conducted by top Yale scientists investigating chronic conditions in individuals after receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. They are finding T-cell exhaustion and prolonged spike protein production in some vaccine recipients. And to put that in lay language, basically, they've found cell damage which compromises the individual's immune system. Chris Cuomo just had Dr. Deborah Burke.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was never able to recover from something like this.
Who has done extensive research into how long COVID is similar to HIV on his show. And listen to this.
Comparisons to HIV, you've done a ton of research in this. Do you believe this is a false flag? Is there something that contextually people need to understand about that comparison? Or is this much darker a potential reality than we knew?
The reason the comparison to HIV is important is because HIV was also asymptomatic. I mean, you couldn't see the virus through symptoms because people were infected for 7, 8, 9 years before they developed symptoms. But HIV quietly destroyed our immune system, and we learned a lot about immunology from HIV, and it's changed completely our cancer therapy. We're learning now about mitochondria and viral impact and brain fog and the changes in our neurons and the cells that nourish our neurons that really allow us to think and move. And we're learning that because what of long COVID has done. And so there's two sides of this coin every time. There's a lot of destruction that mild and moderate COVID can do that is on scene, just like HIV was destroying our immune system. But what came out of that is brilliant science that changed how we treated HIV. And if you're diagnosed today, you can live a very normal lifespan and people not only survive but thrive. We need to get to the place where people with long COVID, we've done the research so that people with long COVID can not only survive but thrive.
What?
Yeah. By the way, academic establishment still hasn't admitted that COVID vaccine could cause long COVID as well. That's one of the biggest lies about COVID vaccine, which they're still trying to push forward. But that's another huge topic, and it's even more important than natural immunity, so I'll discuss it separately. Then just listen to his comments, which are pretty much similar. And I agree
has
with.
been done to us and why? The bureaucracy couldn't tell us the truth. We, the American people, are too stupid to understand nuance. Is it because they were bought and paid for by Big Pharma? Is there a more sinister reason? We know COVID came from the Wuhan lab. We know there was NIH funding going toward gain-of-function research. What has been done to us? We need answers. Guys, if you got value from this, please subscribe and follow me here. I'm giving you God-first, quick-hitting commentary to keep you informed, in truth, and on the path toward your potential in this life. I appreciate you.
Yeah, of course, maybe they were paid and bought by Big Pharma, or, as he said, they are driven by something more evil. And the something more evil could just be the same evil altruistic ideas which were behind Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, and all other disgusting socialistic regimes. That might be even the big reason here. Now, after we finished with this, I think, really great video, I could get to the main topic. So what's kind of missing here? Well, we got the fact that, oh, okay, so these people lied to us. We've seen who was the key co-conspirators, right? Some top bureaucrats, NIH, HHS, CDC, right? So they just came up with certain lie based on some technicality, right? The convenience question. Okay, fine. But if it's a lie, and it's a pretty much easily verifiable statement, this means it should have been exposed really quickly by all the research done in academia, right? We would test it and see, oh, okay, no, actually, the people who got COVID, they don't need the vaccine. It's easy to see. But instead, what happened was the opposite. Somehow, academia managed to produce enough studies supporting those claims and making it into scientific consensus, which then was picked up by the media and broadcasted on the whole population. Again, manufacturing public consensus for further intervention, in the terminology of Edward Bernays. So my goal here is to show you how exactly it was done, which methods, dishonest techniques were used in the process, so that you understand how exactly academia functions. The video is really long. I even have to make some notes. Yeah, this we already watched. So what exactly they need to do, right? They made this decision. Now they need to take some actions. Okay. So Francis Collins, he goes out and makes this opinion piece. How immunity generated from COVID-19 vaccines differs from an infection. And you know who Francis Collins is, right? He's in the midst of all this controversy. Yeah, for example, now it's already been exposed Yeah, that's summary of his congressional grillings. 6 feet apart, social distance going, stating that it was likely not based on solid scientific data. Again, it's another manufactured consensus which they had. But today we'll be talking about natural immunity. Okay, issue as we move closer to the end of the pandemic is determining more precisely how long people exposed to COVID-19 virus will make interest antibody against the dangerous coronavirus. Okay, I know I can't read that fast, but you could read yourself. Finding the answer is also potentially complicated with the new variants of concern appearing around the world, they could find ways to evade acquired immunity, increasing the chances of outbreaks. Well, okay, so they could avoid acquired immunity. Acquired through which methods? Like natural immunity or the vaccine immunity? Or potentially both, right? Okay, so here it talks about how it will depend on type of antibodies which were generated. And he cited the studies. He said the study in the end, I'll show you, which showed that antibodies generated in response to mRNA vaccine will target broader range of SARS-CoV variants carrying single-letter changes in a key portion of spike protein compared to antibodies acquired from infection. Well, why? He'll explain later. And again, but before he already makes conclusions. Right? These results add to evidence that people with acquired immunity may have different levels of protection to emerging SARS-CoV-2 variants. More important, the data provide further documentation that those who have had and recovered from COVID-19 infection still stand to benefit from getting vaccinated. Okay, so far, nothing was said. Something about antibodies. And he already making conclusions. But in the next paragraph, he'll explain. Okay, he mentions people who did the study, right? And that's what his reasoning. He talks about how they focused on receptor binding domain, a key region of spike protein that starts SARS-CoV-2 outer surface. Okay, he explained what RBD is. I think you already know what it is, right? It's, let me show you the image. It's part of the spike protein which is used to bind to ACE2 receptor. I don't know whether you see it. This part. So this part binds to ACE2 receptor. If you have an antibody against it, and the antibody will stuck on the spike protein in this place, spike protein will not be able to bind to ACE2 receptor. So you won't be able to infect a cell, and antibody will work as a neutralizing antibody. Okay, he explained its importance here. This makes RBD a prime target for both natural immunities and those generated by vaccine. And he explained what they did. They map all possible mutations, and that would change the ability of the virus to bind to ACE2 or for RBD direct antibodies to strike the targets. I expect to hit the targets there. Here is the reference. Okay, this time they wanted to explore any difference between RBD direct antibodies based on how they were acquired. Okay, so there's some technicalities. The main idea is that specifically antibodies they're comparing antibodies generated by mRNA vaccines and antibodies generated through natural immunity. Antibodies elicited by mRNA vaccine were more focused to the RBD compared to antibodies elicited by infection, which more often targeted other portion of spike protein. And by the way, they also target other proteins in the virus as well. Importantly, the vaccine elicited antibodies targeted a broader range of places on RBD than those elicited by natural immunity. Okay, and that's expected, all right? Because if you know how this mRNA vaccine was designed, it actually uses what's called, specially modified spike protein, which has several receptor binding domains. They did it on purpose because they wanted this neutralizing antibodies so much. They were hoping to get them. And because of that, and partially because of the fact that in the vaccine you only have spike protein, right, generated, not the whole virus, you would have more antibodies specifically targeting this part. Here, he makes a conclusion from it that this finding suggests that natural immunity and vaccine-generated immunity to SARS-CoV-2 virus will differ in how they recognize new viral variants. What's more, antibodies acquired with the help of vaccine may be more likely to target new variants potently, even with variants carrying new mutations in RBD. Because he's saying, oh, okay, they target more regions in RBD, so if some parts of it mutate, we still can hope that others remain the same, and we have more antibodies, more options to target RBD. You have high chance of antibodies staying neutralizing ones. Okay, then this is not important. Okay, so then he is talking about exposing the fact that mRNA delivery may change the venting. Okay, so get please. A third difference that natural infection only exposes the body to the virus and respiratory tract, unless the illness is very severe, while the vaccine is delivered to muscles, where the immune system may have an even better chance of seeing it and responding vigorously. Okay. Then he just made the broader point that, there are tons of different coronaviruses, and if you got infected 1 year, you usually could be infected a year after it. Keep acquired immunity, and now the process of doing, yeah. Okay, so let me address those points. So first of all, the idea that neutralizing antibodies are, the main thing which you should be looking at is entirely flawed. This basically his speculations, but in reality, it's our immune system is way more difficult. In fact, it doesn't have like all sorts of antibodies play a role. Even the one which don't bind to receptor binding domain, they bind into some other parts of the virus. They still make a virus a target for your immune system cell. And the big question is how many, T cells you will have, what kind of, conditions they will be in, whether they'll be exhausted or not, type of B cells you will have, and so on. This is just, in vitro paper, which doesn't tell us anything about actual immunity. It just almost baseless claim. Here, if you want, I found you a study. If you think that that's just my idea. Yes, opsonization is this process of coating the virus with antibodies. Okay, focus on antibodies that neutralize ACE2 spike interaction, but not on the non-neutralizing antibodies. Okay, so this is the mechanism of killing the pathogen, right? Typically, mobile antibodies trigger stronger phagocyte response. Here we show that spike-specific antibodies, depending on concentration, can either enhance or reduce spike phagocytosis by monocyte independently of the antibody neutralization potential. Surprisingly, we find that both convalescent patient plasma and patient-derived monoclonal antibodies lead to maximum opsonization already at low levels of bound antibodies, and it's reduced as antibody binding to spike protein increases. Okay, so something counterintuitive, right? Just again, we don't know what this means. Most likely, again, this paper is also irrelevant, but it just shows that your intuition about how immunization work is totally irrelevant towards, it's basically almost irrelevant for reality of what's happening. So this speculation here is just, again, unproven anyhow. And this paper does actually support any of these conclusions at all in just one in vitro paper. And the next speculation, which I read you, about vaccine delivered in the muscles being better, again, is also not really convincing and is also most likely wrong. In fact, you have what's called IgA antibodies. Yeah, so IgA antibodies are the primary defense mechanism for mucosal surfaces, protecting against pathogens and toxins secretion like saliva, tears, and breast milk. Okay, so they are predominantly produced during natural infections. And in fact, again, because of that, we could expect natural infections to produce the better first line of defense, because you are getting reinfected from, again, your nose and mouth. So it's better that you have a lot of IgAs there, which you most likely will not even have from the vaccine, which is injected in the blood. So I understand that this argument is speculative. However, we already have nasal spray vaccines. Dr. Bean was making reviews of them, and it seems like they work better and they have less side effects. So most likely his speculation here about it is just wrong as well. There is no reason to think that injecting vaccine in the blood will create better immunity than acquiring it through your naturally through, again, mucosal surfaces, creating all the standard set of antibodies which our body needs to fight off natural infection, how it arrives in us. So, as you can see, the opinion piece mostly written without any evidence, right? He just mixed some of the studies in a special way to, seed certain narrative. And I talk about the importance of opinion pieces written by experts. They're setting up narratives for, normies in academia below to follow. Yeah, look, what he writes in the end. evidence continues to suggest that acquired immunity from vaccines still offers substantial protection against the new variants now circulating around the globe. So he's trying to make the case that, oh, you know, we know from history natural immunity wanes over here, but the vaccines, well, we don't know much, but it looks like it should be fine. Well, that's not true. What he says here, he talks about a study from Israel when they were comparing effectiveness of the vaccine against different variants. We see that B117 is pretty much the dominant variant. And what we see, the study shows, interestingly, the evidence showed that these breakthrough infections with the B11 variant occurred slightly more often in the people after the first vaccine dose compared to unvaccinated people. So basically, if you got COVID vaccine, you are more likely to catch this B117 variant like in this small period of time. Okay, no evidence found for increased breakthrough rate for B1 a week or more after the second dose. Okay, yes, this effect disappears after 2 weeks. In contrast, after the second vaccine dose, infection with B1351 became slightly more frequent. Okay, that's the conclusion of the paper. Nothing, you know, really tells me that vaccine would remain protective forever. And then he said, it's important to note, however, that the researchers only observed 11 infections with B1351 variant, 8 of them in individuals vaccinated with 2 doses. Interestingly, all 8 tested positive 7 to 13 days after receiving the second dose. No one in the study tested positive for this variant 2 weeks or more after the second dose. Well, okay, and that's basically his main positive conclusion from here, right? The rest is just indecisive. But this conclusion came from this non-dominant strain, which clearly dies out. And in fact, I could show you how the study looks like. And by the way, as you can see, he cites preprint here. Now, this study is already published in Nature. I'll show you how it looks like now. Okay. Yeah, so that's the graph. I mean, the studies start to look like way nicer. I'm totally not against citing preprints. I don't care. For me, only the information is relevant. But I just want like to point out, whenever any, you know, anti-vaxxers like me would cite preprint, the media would start seizing, almost vomiting with bile. How dare they? Oh, it's a preprint, it's a peer review, not peer reviewed. Oh, how could you do this so fringe? But apparently when Francis Collins does it, it's totally fine. Yeah, so as you can see, that's the distribution of B117 versus B1351 in the case study, which is vaccinated versus control, with testing the ratios. And what they found that, yeah, and how he said, post 2 weeks, just nobody gets this B1351, neither in case, neither in control. This claim, which he used here, doesn't It's not relevant for anything. This strain just died out, and we now have no cases for it. All the information sits here, which he described, and that's not really decisive for vaccine at all. Yet, again, in both cases, he again plead people to get vaccinated based on these vague guesses. Again, here as well, in the first opinion piece. By scope of winning this contest with the virus to get as many people as possible. Blah, 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 blah. They also was an important reminder to roll up your sleeve for the vaccine if you haven't already done so, whether or not if you've had COVID-19. You see, that's his conclusion. From what? From bunch of in vitro studies and one preprint, which doesn't even support his conclusion. Let me, where is it? By the way, another interesting observation. There will be a difference between how conclusion is written in the preprint versus how it's written in the published Nature paper. You see discussion. Our results showed there is an increased incidence of virus variant of concern B135 in vaccine breakthrough infections in fully vaccinated individuals, and an increased incidence of B11 in partially vaccinated individuals. Okay, that's their conclusions. Now here, to get this thing published in Nature, that's what you need to write instead. Our results show that there is an increased proportion of virus in vaccine breakthrough infection that occur within two particular windows of time. An increased proportion B1351 was found in individuals fully vaccinated to 7 to 14 days after the second dose, as compared to the much vaccinated controls. Furthermore, an increased portion of B117 was found in partially vaccinated individuals 14 days after the first dose, until 6 days after the second dose. Okay, as compared to unvaccinated ones. Yet, we find no evidence for increased breakthrough rates of B117 a week or more after the second dose. And then they say specifically, not enough data were available to assess vaccine breakthrough of B1351. Those one category. So I agree that in some sense this is better, like it's more refined. But it's funny that you have to change, they change the conclusion a little bit from preprint to here. So overall, I don't know whether this fact here is enough to make any serious conclusion about how the vaccine will respond to future variants. I guess this is not even Delta yet, and not Omicron. So the conclusions which Francis Collins are making here are certainly premature. But now we are getting to the main part. So the opinion pieces are the first step. There is no yet real evidence backing his policy which he prescribed. Now it's the job of the normies in academia below him to back his baseless claim with some evidence, and we'll see how it's done. Of course, I could not show you all of the papers they have published, but I will show you some most screaming examples. Here I'll start with another opinion piece which will cite certain papers. this website is some sort of think tank of healthcare professionals. You could Google them very well. Health Wikipedia. Very well, the website providing health and wellness information by health professionals. Okay, so not just mainstream media. This is supposed to be a collection of the scientific knowledge given by professionals. And this will be basically another propaganda piece which will comprise certain papers twisting the results in a certain way to, again, support this fraudulent conclusion, which was, again, artificially created through the conspiracy, basically. Okay, so they go on talking about antibodies, what they are. Well, I guess you know what they are, right? It's they explain, okay, what's neutralizing antibodies, what's non-neutralizing. Так. Okay, so they're talking about here how for the vaccine to work, it must produce neutralizing antibodies. Well, as I said, it's not obvious and maybe not true. Well, yes, you will not be neutralizing the virus, but you still be coating it with antibodies, making it target for immune system. That's not clear. But okay, both vaccines and natural immune infection produce the neutralizing antibodies. Or they here explain what IgM is. It's actually quite interesting, but I'm gonna skip it. Here they're talking about antibodies produced by the vaccine, and now they start talking about natural infection. Here where the propaganda happens. Yes, the main job will be to downplay it as much as they can. Okay, so they actually acknowledge that it exists actually, and then they provide links to support the idea that natural immunity is basically not enough. So, for example, I review these 3 studies for you, show how it works in the weeds. In 2022 study, researchers concluded that reinfection after natural infection is 7 times more likely than infection after vaccination. However, this data were compiled before the advent of the Delta and Omicron variants. Since these variants are more contagious, this reinfection rate may now be higher. Well, or maybe lower. How do you know? Vaccines will not prove to work better against new variants. Okay, so let's look what they've done here. Yeah, I made notes for myself about this study. So here they again they use some complicated test for infection. They have, you see, saliva samples and nasopharyngeal swabs, and they are comparing which one is more sensitive and which one works better. They are saying, see, only 2 samples positive on the swab for only the viral or the engine. And viral gene is the gene encoding nucleocapsid protein. Wait, I hope will be some sort of photo. Yeah, here we go. The protein which RNA sits. So it's a test for this gene. And they say we obtain concordant results. So they basically try to claim that whatever test they are using is similar to the standard nasal swab. However, the language is a bit wizzly. So I'm not even sure that it's true. I feel like from what you'll see in the end that this test is way more sensitive. And that's why the result is so weird. And it's more importantly to point out that it's just wrong to test reinfection based on the test. Well, yes, you might have positive tests, but you might not have symptoms at all. And in fact, that's what mostly is happening. And we'll see even here that actually, depending how many viral genes they choose to look for in the test, only N protein or more, the results differ. Therefore, it's clearly, the test clearly not indicative on reinfection. Let me find this place for you. So the results. We are comparing number of reinfections, right? They observed 8 putative reinfections out of 266 participants, which is approximately 3%, right? And here they admit reinfections were defined as 2 PCR positive samples interspread with more than 1 PCR negative sample. Okay, they're saying 7 were AG plus positive. That was, again, tested positive for only 1 of 3 viral genes. When considering all individuals testing positive for more than 1 gene in the PCR assay, frequency of reinfection decreased significantly to 2 out of 266. Okay, I made the note here for myself. So that clearly proves that this is a complete nonsense. Why are you even defining reinfections like this? You are testing for 1 gene, you have 1 number of positive cases. You're testing for 3 genes, you have less number of positive cases. And you ask how many of them develop symptoms, you would get even less. So it's completely meaningless. Now they're comparing with, again, infections of vaccinated subjects. Here they have 2,000 subjects. And again, they looked at tests for 1 gene and tests for 3 genes. And I recall the result. For 1 gene, it's 30 out of this 2029. What did he say it? Yeah. We identified 30 cases of molecularly detectable infections. It's for, I guess, it's for 1 gene, and if we allow for 3 genes, yeah, they will only be left with 15. Yeah. Yeah, well, 15 out of 30 of this case showed positivity for 2 or 3 viral genes out of 3 tests, while the remaining 15 were positive for only the N gene. So again, the result changes of how many proteins you choose, and we could see that the numbers for more than one gene, for natural infection and for breakthrough infection are already exactly the same, pretty much the same. So if you already used, a little bit fairer test to as an indication of their infection, you already show that they're the same. And even here in these numbers, they differ just like, maybe 2 times, but not 7 times. In fact, this number 7 never appeared in the paper. The 7 times claim just is never shown here, never. Like, this is entirely made up. Just completely misquoted the paper, completely misquoted. That's not what the paper ever showed. What else I want to add here? Yeah, that they tested vaccines only for 3-4 months period, right? Table 2. We see it here. Yes. Which we know is a little bit unfair, because, well, the vaccine immunity wanes afterwards. You can't really claim anything if you're only testing the vaccine for short period of time. Because I don't know, it's I would say at best misleading, because people expect to be immunized forever. Originally, that's what they expected. Or at least this information should have always been included in the review. And that's what I was talking about. The durations of the infections, duration infections, and time between them are unrealistic. If you find file S1, here you go. How to open it? First of all, who are we talking about? Healthy nurses, clinicians, 41, 42 years of age, not some immunocompromised old guys, okay? And here we go, what are the results are. Duration of first infection, according to the tests. I don't know whether it's like what hours, days. They don't have the units in the table. It's just like, I wouldn't even publish it. So probably days. You're telling me that person is infected for 77 days, 73 days, 154 days? Doesn't make any sense. I hope I just misunderstanding something. And then they say, telling me that, somebody got infected second times, less than just in 1 month. They're just completely unrealistic. Again, 1 month here, 1 month here. So it's clearly telling us that, you have some sort of N proteins left somewhere for some reasons, and just at random times you're getting tested positive for this N protein gene. I guess that doesn't, there's not a good evidence for anything at all. So I am very disappointed with this paper itself. Actually, let's look at the conclusions. And I'm, of course, even more disappointed with how it was quoted, because, again, the number 7 times, which is, again, the striking result, is not even here. Yeah, they quote the favorite results. I would say it's pretty dishonest because we already knows what they mean by infection. Some random N protein gene test. Shorter duration, again, meaningless stuff. No, the antibody levels is theoretical things. So I think it's pretty dishonest. And they knew that those who will be quoting the paper in the media will not look into all those details and will produce something like this. But honestly, this was beyond my imagination. I couldn't have thought that, they will turn these numbers into 7 times difference. It's just unimaginable level of deception. Here we go for the next study. Another study found an 82% reduced risk of infection after vaccination with a single dose of Pfizer vaccine compared with those who were previously infected but unvaccinated. These results reflect data from the Delta variant, but the Omicron variant was not included in the study. Okay, close this one because I'm done with it. Here, the study is designed the following way. So we have people who are infected in both groups, but in one group we add one vaccine dose on top, and we see, whether it will make it better for him, whether he'll be reinfected with a small chance, right? Whether the person will have small chance to be reinfected. Okay, so what are the... Just I was looking at my notes because it took me a huge amount of time to read those papers in great details and understand them. So now I'm just looking what I found. First of all, the design is very weird because they have different groups and they take them, they analyze them multiple times, or they join them together, so they have different numbers. Luckily, the results are almost the same. So let's go to table 1. Contains the results. We find it. Here it is, table 1. So again, I'll only focus on symptomatic reinfections, okay? Because, as I said, it doesn't make sense to look at some tests. So symptomatic reinfection in vaccinated, 126. Out of this number, 60,000 people who, again, received vaccination after the primary infection. And so I did the math, right? Wait, what was 126? Yes, this is the chance of reinfection if you got infected and then you get a Pfizer shot. Now we are looking at symptomatic reinfections without getting vaccine, only getting the virus. So we're having this amount out of these primarily infected people. Okay, actually you need to subtract the vaccinated ones. So yeah, this is total. This is the amount of them who got vaccinated. So you need to subtract these vaccinated people from these guys, and then you need to divide this number by this number, so get the by the resulting number, this one, to get the symptomatic reinfection rates without the vaccine. So you're getting some sort of 0.089. So approximately I would say, yeah, this number, you see that the vaccine adds something, right, to your protection. And this number is high, right? but both results are already minuscule. It's like we're talking about what 0.2% chance of getting even symptomatic reinfection. There's no need to decrease this probability to this one by taking another shot, because again, shots are not safe. These people here, if you study they don't even talk about side effects. You see, vaccine provides immunity without the risk of complications from exposure to the virus. Well, yes, from exposure to the virus, but they have their own risks themselves. So it's entirely stupid gamble to trying to take, the vaccine to reduce this chance to this one. Oh, sorry, this one to this one. Yeah, so you'll have 0.2% if you get the vaccine after infection, and you have 1% if you didn't get the vaccine. However, the study doesn't say anything about hospitalizations. Yeah, hospitalization, just, you see, there's not enough data. That's what we should care about. So again, I don't see how this is relevant. You would say maybe what they're saying here is right in this case, but they're omitting the fact that this is meaningless. You're comparing two numbers which are almost zero. And they downplay the risk of getting the vaccine. So make it look like, oh, don't worry, just get the vaccine, like it will add something. Now moving on. Studies have indicated that people with symptoms of COVID-19 also seem to produce effective neutralizing antibodies. In fact, contracting COVID and then getting vaccinated appears to produce the most robust protection against later infection. In March 2022, study mentioned above, which looked at more than 35,000 people, the authors found that infection-acquired immunity waned after 1 year in vaccinated participants, but remained consistently higher than 90% in those who were subsequently vaccinated, even in persons infected more than 18 months previously. Okay, so let's look. Oh, he's asking whether I'm a human. Well, I don't know. Let's see. Okay, so again, they're the same design. We are looking at infection versus infection plus 1 dose against 3 infections. Yeah, so again, the methods is the PCR testing. Where couldn't find it. Okay, let me just find page. Okay, primary outcome. The primary outcome was PCR confirmed infection. Again, so we rely on testing. Here is the findings. At 14 days before after the date of the positive PCR test, among participants with prior infections, 61% reported COVID-19 related symptoms. 13% reported other symptoms, and 4% reported no symptoms. Okay, that's for participants with primary infections. In contrast, among the participants with reinfections, 34 reported COVID-19 related symptoms and 20% reported other symptoms. 21% reported no symptoms and 25 didn't provide data on symptoms at all. So we see that depending on how you are getting your immunity, depending how you get immunity, you will either more likely to have symptoms with positive test or less likely. Oh, sorry. I mean, whether you get whether you're getting the virus first time or whether you're getting it second time. So the first time you're more likely to get symptoms. Okay, so they're talking about the vaccine now. So basically, again, it's not clear whether getting a positive test means you are actually affected, in the sense that whether you develop symptoms, whether you're sick, right? And we see that only small amount of people actually are reporting symptoms after infection. So it's not the tie is not, the link is not direct. So it's not really fair to make this analysis like this. Yeah, but that's not all. Yes, the main part of the conclusion that they say here, durability protection after primary infection. That's what the claim was about. A total of 600 participants in the previous infected cohort were followed in the unvaccinated follow-up period and up to 1 year after a primary infection. These participants were predominantly infected in the spring of 2020 and were followed in the period before emergence of Delta variant. The risk of reinfection among these participants was 86%, lower than the risk of primary infection among the unvaccinated participants in the previously uninfected cohort. Okay, so they're admitting that the participants were predominantly infected in spring of 2020. So waning of protection was not observed more than 1 year after infection, more than 6 months after vaccination. Yeah, so essentially, we are talking about people who were infected like almost a year ago, almost a year before they could potentially have a chance to get the vaccine. So it's not completely fair analysis. Yes, we're talking about some sort of PCR positive test and some symptoms. If you get COVID a year ago and year after this you're getting a vaccine, yeah, it's fair to say that okay, probably for a short period of time after that you'll be less likely to get a positive test and develop symptoms, right? Because you kind of just refreshed your memory cells, your memory B cells. Yeah, but that again doesn't really prove anything dramatic for me. Yeah, nothing is mentioned about hospitalization. Yeah, now we are comparing infection with vaccination versus not. In the previously infected cohort with unvaccinated participant in the previously infected cohort as the reference group, a beneficial boosting of infection-acquired immunity was apparent, with combined protection of more than 90% after vaccination, after both the first and second doses. Waning of protection was not observed more than 1 year after infection or more than 6 months after vaccination. Okay, so they're talking about figures 2 in table 3. So that's how they look like. As you can see, the main claim is based on vaccine effectiveness more than this number of days, right? And we see that the uncertainty interval on the result is actually big enough to pretty much overlap with no vaccine. That nothing really is proven here. Yeah. If you have overlapping uncertainty intervals, you can't really make the corresponding statements. And same, by the way, on this graph too. The uncertainty interval of vaccine effectiveness less than 1 year after infection just have ridiculous uncertainty interval. Basically crosses 50% effectiveness. Yeah, which is basically the 0 mark. So I don't know. This is just not a statistically significant result. Just doesn't mean anything. So this paper again doesn't really make any case for repetitive vaccination after you get the infection. The error bars are just huge everywhere. Plus again, it's somewhat misleading about the situation which we are comparing these two immunization procedures. Because as you probably remember, the policy was not that, if you get infected, 1 year after it, you need a booster, right? Well, because that's what you're kind of trying to find out here. the requirement was actually here in this university, it was at some point 6 days after you get positive test, you're supposed to get the vaccine. That's really, I'm not making this up. It's the length of exception which they gave us, 6 days. So now we're talking about 1 year. So again, I think this study here doesn't really mean anything for the main narrative, and yet they pushing it right, like fanatically. But that's actually not the worst studies. I just wanted to start from them because I was trying to explain how this consensus kind of formed. You have these opinion pieces written in these kind of simple words, which tied out together, relatively average studies, sometimes really bad ones, terribly misquoting them and mispresenting them. These reviews then usually get picked up by the media, the policymakers, and they are broadcasted on the whole population. So the studies like this, I don't know what to tell about them. It's not like I would say that it's a fraud, right? But it's just a pretty poor quality study. Like whether your vaccine adds anything to primary infection depends on is eaten up by the uncertainty interval. This question is not resolved. It's really sad to watch. But yet these relatively bad studies, average studies, produced in huge numbers, could be used by the media to create an illusion of consensus. Here I'm planning to shift to the next step, which is more like, what I would call already on the edge of some sort of sensational fraud. When you have really bad studies which shows huge numbers, which then fed into the media and broadcasted everywhere without even bundling them into opinion pieces. And the worst studies actually came from CDC. Yes, so this is like average, but CDC turned out to be the worst. So this study planning to consider next. It's pretty famous. It's known as the Kentucky study. It was somewhat a big deal. Okay, so there's the conclusion. In this case control study, being unvaccinated was associated with 2.35 times the odds of reinfection compared with being fully vaccinated. Okay. Yeah, so we're talking about reinfections as well, as usual. So the same setup. Again, so vaccinations, infections were conferred by testing. So we suffer from the same problem. Testing doesn't mean symptoms, as we already showed by the previous studies. Only like 34% of participants who tested positive in their infection had COVID-like symptoms, and 20% have some other symptoms. Again, and the testing is voluntarily, right? So persons who have been vaccinated are possibly less likely to get tested. That's what they say in their own limitations. And in fact, they cite other limitations as well. But the biggest problem is the same as we had before. That in the previous study, that they're comparing those who were predominantly infected in October, December 2020 and later infected between May and June 2021 with those who were not reinfected. And vaccine was only started to be available since May, June 2021. So again, the same problem. We are basically comparing people who got infected like a year ago, right, a year before, with those who just got the vaccine. You know, with those who were infected back then and then just got the vaccine right before the study. So the probability of getting, you know, positive test and maybe symptoms here will be lower, but what does it mean? Doesn't mean anything for hospitalization, and it doesn't mean anything in terms of whether natural immunity is worse, because we're talking about it being worse 1 year after. That's not fair. And again, it's not what was in the policy prescription. And the numbers, yeah. If I calculate, yeah, to get into the bad part, if I calculate the numbers, just show it to you. Yeah, I guess I only have that in the table. Yeah, here we go. The numbers look like this. So people who had, yeah, I mean, we should tell more about the design of the study. We are comparing basically people who got reinfected versus people who didn't get reinfected. And we are looking at the proportion of vaccinated people among each group. Okay, that's the study design. It's slightly different from what we had before, but the idea is clear. We see that among those who got reinfected, among these 246 people, 20.3% were vaccinated, and among those who had no reinfection, high portion was vaccinated, 34.3%, right? So that's how we evaluate vaccine effectiveness. Basically, if you just crudely take the ratio of these two numbers, you will get something like 1.69, right? 1.7. That's the rate of additional vaccine dose, the effectiveness of additional vaccine dose, decrease the chance of getting reinfected by 1.7 times. And this is done without time matching. They supposed to be doing time matching, but I'm not sure they did it, and instead they have the result with this, you know, huge uncertainty interval from 1.58 to 3.47, and this number 2.34 is just the middle of this uncertainty interval, and only, you know, the smallest end here kind of matches with this crude approximation, but the result is reported everywhere here without the uncertainty interval. And of course, everywhere in the media, right, this study was strongly discussed, and again, report without any uncertainty intervals. Yeah, that was, in very deported in very unpleasant ways. There's meeting Rand Paul and Thomas Massie saying that they have who have steadfastly refused to get the COVID vaccine, saying that they have natural immunity because they had the viral infection. But a new study from U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, based on data from people in Kentucky who contracted COVID-19 a second time, said that the vaccine boosts immunity in people who have had the virus. The vaccine in people who had contracted COVID-19 are more than twice as likely to catch it again than those who got vaccinated after contracting the virus, it said. So again, it's important to see not only what the study says, but how the media portrays this. So the uncertainty interval more than twice, of course, is not mentioned. And the fact that we are looking at people who got naturally immunized a year before the study versus those who just got the vaccine a couple of weeks ago is not mentioned as well. And so on, it continues. And I'm trying to emphasize that the study was cited by all the mainstream media actually in a similar way. It's hard to find these old results because Google downplays them now. So instead, I need to do something weird. I need to look for specific websites, like like this. I need to add, for example, New York Times, and then you'll see that indeed New York Times talk about that, report on the study. Couldn't even look at it because I don't have a subscription for New York Times, obviously. Okay, so you could look at as examples yourself, but you basically have to look for keywords plus the media which you want to find. Otherwise, the Google would just downplay this old media report because they're like not new, and you will have hard times trying to find them here. You could see New York Times is nowhere to be seen here anymore if I just don't put it here. So that's the one of the most egregious cases, but the next one, again from CDC, is even worse. I think this is the worst case. It's like a cherry on the cake, because that's show how just not how careless people are, but also how malicious they are. Yeah, again, this study was cited by almost all the mainstream media, and you could even see that they wanted it. They wanted for the message, because that's essentially the study which was used to cancel natural immunity, right? Before it was like 2 times, but this one led to its cancellation. A study of spliced patients with symptoms similar to COVID-19 found unvaccinated people with a previous infection were 5 times more likely to have a positive COVID-19 test compared to vaccinated people. Get vaccinated as soon as possible. Okay, so they made this stupid banner in the middle of the paper, specifically for the people in the media to shovel it shovel down their throats and push the vaccine as much as they can. But at the same time, again, even here, you already look at the confidence interval for this 5.5 number, and you see that it's just ridiculous. It's from 2.7 to 11. What is it doing there? Like, if this was a theoretical physics, physics paper, I would never get it published. Like, this is a ridiculous result. But if you look at the details, it gets even worse. This study is just not what you think. It had very weird methods. So the data in the study is people who got hospitalized with flu-like symptoms. That's the group which will be working with. During January 1st, September 2nd, 2021, a total of 200,000 hospitalizations of COVID-like illness were identified. Okay, so it's just people who got into hospital with COVID-like illness, and we will be running a study on these people. So again, that's just very strange. That think about what type of slice of population you are using, what it has to do with healthy people who are not getting into hospital with COVID-like illness. I mean, COVID-like illness, you need to understand, it has to do with COVID, right? It's just people who end up in hospital with something like a flu, and they just, because of that, got tested for COVID. And that's why we have some sort of data about them. But it's just not an average person at all. Like, if you're young and healthy, right, you will never get hospitalized with COVID-like illness. That's just completely meaningless study, in a sense. Like, why are you even looking at people hospitalized with COVID-like illnesses? Like, there's not a representative slice of population at all. But anyway, they just proceed. Molecular testing was performed on 94,000 of them, and 65%. Among this patient, they found 7,000, right, had at least one of the SARS-CoV-2 test results more than 40 days before hospitalization, met the criteria for either of two exposure categories. So 1,000 hospitalizations were among previously infected and unvaccinated persons, and 6,300 were among fully vaccinated and previously uninfected patients. So table 1. So we're comparing again, people who was previously infected but were not vaccinated, and people who were previously vaccinated but not infected, and we are trying to see what the probability of them landing into hospital with COVID is, right? Now they'll basically, the next step is look, out of those patients, how many of them were actually tested positive for COVID in this hospitalization, okay? So that's the idea. That's what we'll be looking for. And that's what they say. Laboratory confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection was identified among 324 of these 6,000 fully vaccinated people, and among, again, 89 of the 3,020 unvaccinated people, so 8.7%. Yeah, let me check. From here, we just, you could take the double ratio and see of these two numbers, 5% versus 8.7%. And approximately get the idea what this rate was. So no, approximately to 1.7 times, right? That's below even the lower value of the uncertainty interval. So somehow, with all the manipulations they have, probably time adjustment and so on, they was able to earn themselves this ridiculous, grotesque uncertainty interval, which makes everything meaningless, and put the result in the middle of this uncertainty interval. And after that, they had the audacity to take this result without this uncertainty interval and put it into their banner, the poster, which then again will get recited everywhere by all the medias without this uncertainty interval. Where it is? Yeah, again, I have to be looking for specific papers, I guess. Yeah, here is the one citation of it, another citation. Again, this is not quite mainstream media already, because all mainstream media reports are getting downgraded and they just disappear from Google search if you just don't. Yeah, if you just don't search for them specifically like this, then you're finding that they actually had the reporting that one recent CDC study found that people with natural immunity through infection were 5 times more likely to develop COVID-19 compared to vaccinated ones. So again, if you want to see all these reports and see how overwhelming they were, you have to be typing in these names here separately. Because back then, when I first time discovered this paper, literally when it was first published, and I type this search in Google, I think I even was looking for something else. All of the mainstream media were citing it, all of them. And then I found the original paper, and I look at it, and I was shocked by just the poverty of its quality. It's just completely embarrassing. Like the choice of the group, the uncertainty interval, this is all really bad. They actually tried to report, the time adjusted ratio when we take into account when the vaccine was given, when the person got infected, and this number is smaller. Take a time adjusted one here somewhere. Adjusting for time since previous infection or completing vaccination in the model. So now the number is getting more realistic, closer to what I told you, 1.7, and on the lowest end of the uncertainty interval. But the mean is still 3.2. But they didn't even report. They choose the number 5 without time adjustment, which will be the biggest, because they wanted to cancel natural immunity, right? It's not enough to say, oh, wait, it's just not that good. It's like, yeah, vaccine is kind of better. No, the desire was to cancel it so they could, as Paul Offit said, have no bureaucratic problems here. Because if you just say, oh, okay, fine, for 1 year, you actually okay, you don't need to get the vaccine. As I said, oh, we run into some sort of bureaucratic technicalities, or we don't want to do this. So again, the desire from top bureaucrats was to cancel it. And that's what this unscrupulous researchers from CDC did here. Yeah, and these numbers from table 2, by the way, just completely taken out of nowhere. I don't know what they even mean. You could just look them up yourself. They also had like an idea to see whether restriction time since previous infection or vaccination will affect the results, and then they just say that they have this number of participants satisfying this criteria, and this number of participants, which just never was mentioned in the main body of the paper. Just these numbers appear out of nowhere. So I get maybe they forgot to mention them or something, but it's just unclear. It's probably a minor issue, but it just adds on to the whole negative impression about this paper. Yeah. Yeah, again, look, New York Times. The study of 7,000 people found that unvaccinated people who had COVID were 5 times as likely to get infected again as fully vaccinated ones. New York Times. So no uncertainty interval mentioned, and neither the fact that this was a study run on people hospitalized with flu-like symptoms, and the fact that this result was not time matched for the moment of initial exposure to the pathogen. None of this is mentioned, but that's how the narrative is shaped. You take the study, you replace it with some sort of beautiful banner, ignoring all the details, and then you fed it into the media, and media works as a multiplier. There's many mainstream media who create an impression that oh, it becomes the studies. This is what people in the opinion pieces write as well. This is what we see in Very Well Health and Francis Collins. It's all agree with each other, and now we have a consensus. We have top bureaucrats saying this, health professionals think tanks saying this, and now we have studies done by CDC which confirm this, right? Together with multiple studies below that run by some sort of smaller researchers who also contribute to the whole body, creating an impression that this topic is the most well-studied topic on Earth. Look how many papers we have, right? But in reality, if you go to the width of each paper, you see that their conclusions don't support the broader, more crude narrative about natural immunity getting cancelled. Basically, if you get the virus, you have to get the vaccine 5 days after it. That's what the policy was here in this university. Yeah, and it's fair to say that 2 years after it, they start admitting that even Smith started admitting that they were wrong. Of course, before that, there were already studies, even by CDC, which agreed that natural immunity is not vacuous. It exists, and it's really good. It's really good protection against hospitalization. Here you see on these graphs, the 3 bottom one is estimated hazard rate for being hospitalized, and we see that vaccinated is actually being vaccinated is actually slightly worse than having a previous COVID-19 diagnosis. See, they're almost the same. natural immunity is kind of even winning a little bit. And at the same time, we see that getting vaccinated on top of natural immunity, this black line, doesn't change anything already, pretty much at all. Yeah, of course, like it's hard to look at it. So if I were them, I would present these 3 lines on a separate graph so people could see clearly what's going on there. But I think it's clear that natural immunity wins over the vaccinations, and vaccination plus natural immunity doesn't really add anything already for the protection against hospitalizations. And later there was also a Lancet report, again vindicating natural immunity, which was already covered by the media as well, but it was like 2 years later where the whole damage was already done by their lies. Yeah. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection is as protective as vaccination against severe illness, and their study finds. This was in, as you can see, 2023. At some point, even mainstream media will start to admit well, I would say admit, right? Will start to change narrative, because if they decouple from reality too much, their reputation will tank dramatically, and they will become, their function will become, they will become useless in their main function, which is again the propaganda machine. They work as an important component, right? They have to work as an intermediary between this normies in academia, producing all sorts of results, mostly the one which were requested by top bureaucrats to manufacture the consensus. And then the media goal is to pick up these results, push them on top, propagate and multiply them, so that they, make noise, make them heard more than everything else, to create again the illusion of a scientific consensus, which is what they're after, which is what these cargo cultists for science are after always. Because again, that's give them the possibility for further market interventions, the justifications, moral justifications for that. The last thing to say here is probably that Vinay Prasad had a good review of the media compliance with this completely made up narrative, right? Created by Paul Offit, Anthony Fauci, and Francis Collins, and Rochelle Walensky. Actually, I have it open.
Welcome back to the channel. Previously, I did a video about how public health, by that I mean the leaders of the CDC and White House officials, lied to the American people about natural immunity. They repeatedly pushed the message that natural immunity counts for nothing and you need as many vaccines after COVID-19 infection as if you never had the infection. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And finally, last week in the Lancet, it was firmly discredited, and natural immunity is found to be extremely protective of subsequent severe disease. I talked about that in a prior video. I also made it very clear that video was not about whether or not it's better if you've never had COVID-19 to initially meet the virus or get vaccinated and then meet the virus. I made it very clear that's not what it's about. It's about the unlucky few people that you are summarizing studies that already exist in the literature.
So he'll give the
in other words,
review of
it's not new information. It's an aggregate of information that was already there, but anyone who could read and think and use their brain would have seen this coming. The article makes it very clear that the United States is unusual among peer nations. Other nations gave some credit for having had and recovered from COVID-19. The EU COVID certificate said if you've had COVID-19, you get a certain period of time where that counts as if you've been vaccinated. If you had vaccines, of course, there's some period of time looking at, you will be able to tell because they're all about the same. In other words, natural immunity is a vaccination equivalent for severe disease. Now, people keep talking about antibody titers. Well, this is also debunking that as a correlate. They're also talking about any symptomatic disease. That's a pointless strategy. you're going to get dozens of colds in the next 20 years. We can't be fighting a battle to prevent you from getting colds. That's part of life. You're going to get colds. That's a losing battle. But what we don't want is severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And tackle questions about vaccine immunity. COVID-19 natural immunity versus vaccination from the Nebraska Medicine website.
Yeah,
Tackle
that's
question immunity
he
from COVID, more about the media coverage. Theo, public health.
shows his own examples as well. More of the same type of propaganda.
Lied. I encourage you to check it out. I think it makes some points more about this article. But here I want to talk a little bit more about the media coverage. These were just some of the articles. Natural immunity from COVID is not safer than a vaccine. What if you already had COVID? Do you still need a vaccine? Experts tackle questions about vaccine immunity. COVID-19 natural immunity versus vaccination from the Nebraska Medicine website. I'm just picking two. Actually, I think pick three in this slide deck, but you could pick hundreds. They're all incredibly misleading. The media coverage was deeply misleading. Let's go to the New York Times. The new vaccines were 90% and 94.5% effective, said Mr. Paul. This is Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, and a trained ophthalmologist. And naturally acquired COVID-19 was 99.9999%, 82% effective, he claimed. Mr. Paul is one of many people who, weary of lockdowns and economic losses, have extolled the benefits of surviving coronavirus infection. So already they're sort of painting him in a pejorative light. He only thinks this because he wants us not to lock down. Well, couldn't he also think it because it is actually equivalently protective as vaccines, which now the data overwhelmingly shows? We never called for that study. Not doing that study is inappropriate. It's a regulatory failure. Now we know natural immunity is so protective. How much more protection could it offer? And yet these doctors speculate rampantly. Are they doing so as scientists? Or are they doing so because it's politically expedient, because their side has taken the policy position? We just want to push this on everybody, okay? And I think that's the deep question.
Yeah, in fact, he was right. You see, already back then, he predicted that's probably what happened. Just pick a side that it's all policy position.
We do not have many scientists in this space. We have a lot of people who have more politics in their heart than evidence in their heart. That's the reality. New York Times goes on. This was part of the same article. In a study of more than 3,000 people aged 18 to 34 who were hospitalized with COVID, 20% retired in intensive care and 3% died. Okay, so they're saying it's still important for young people, but if you're hospitalized with COVID, most of these people who get COVID are not hospitalized. What are you talking about? Oh, if you're 18 and die of COVID, there's a 100% risk of dying of COVID. Sure, but the risk of dying of COVID if you get COVID and you're 18 is quite low. Most people are not going to be hospitalized. Most people are not going to go to the intensive care, says Dr. Maldonado. But then she goes on to say something promoting the vaccines. Okay. Oh, here it is. COVID vaccines, in contrast, carry little known risk. They may have been tested in that.
That's the biggest lie. COVID vaccine carry little known risk. They have been tested in tens of thousands of people with no serious side effects, at least so far. That's just wrong. Again, that's another manufactured narrative, and it's actually even worse than with what we have with natural immunity. I decided to start with natural immunity because it's a relatively compact topic, and I could cover a lot of studies on it in one video. But for side effects, I would need several videos, and it's much worse. Every single study run on vaccine safetiness were flawed in many ways. As I said, one of the main issues is that the fact that COVID vaccine could cause long COVID was not even considered. And in randomized controlled trial, all people who developed long COVID after vaccine were classified as reactogenicities, which basically means normal reaction to vaccine component, and they were not follow up properly, just like Ventavia employee, a whistleblower, told us. So again, he just taking the statement out of thin air, relying on this notion of scientific consensus, which again, if you look at every single study separately, is vacuous. It's entirely manufactured.
Thousands of people with no serious side effects, at least so far. Once you start vaccinating millions, you might find very rare events, but we have to know they are very rare and much more rare than the adverse events associated with natural infection. So he's already out on a limb here. And it turned out in retrospect he was wrong, because dose 2 of Moderna has an incredibly high rate of adverse events of myocarditis in young men, dosed to Moderna men between the ages of 18 and 24, and that same person who had just gotten one dose and then met the virus, it's hard to know. In fact, we've modeled it in one peer review paper where we say, if anything, the booster strategy is harmful in that demographic. And so I think that's untrue as well. Let's turn to Nebraska. The data is clear. Natural immunity is not better. COVID-19 vaccines create more effective and longer lasting immunity than natural immunity from infection. Just a total lie. They were just lying. More than a third of COVID-19 infections result in zero protective antibodies. Again, the truth is that when you look in severe disease later, it's extremely protective. Natural immunity fades faster than vaccine immunity. It was a lie. Natural immunity alone is less than half as effective. They have a number, but it's half a lie. It's 100% lie.
Yeah, I show you where it comes from. It is from this 2.34 study, which I already tried to debunk.
And they pulled a number out of their ass. This is bad. This is really bad. They have no credibility in my mind. There's another article. Natural immunity doesn't protect you as well as the COVID vaccines. Here's why. Again, they make it political. Ron DeSantis signed legislation last week that bans businesses from imposing COVID vaccine mandates, including an exemption specifically for people who've had COVID and recovered. DeSantis says, quote, "We recognize people who have natural immunity. Whatever a private employer wants to do, you're automatically exempt because of natural immunity." Well, guess what? Ron DeSantis was 100% correct, just natural immunity. And it's hard to believe that vaccine doses will improve upon it. And to believe that, you need a randomized control trial just in people who've recovered. It goes on. The development of COVID variants makes vaccination particularly important for people who've recovered from the virus. Currently, the Delta variant has dominated the US, but most of the people infected in 2020, all the way to the middle of 2021, were infected with earlier variants, said Chris Baer, an epidemiologist at Hopkins. It may be that you had coronavirus last year and you feel like, therefore, I don't need a vaccine, but that natural immunity is unlikely to protect you against Delta. But the vaccine you're getting is also not a Delta vaccine, it's a Wuhan vaccine. So you're saying getting a Wuhan infection won't protect you against Delta, but getting a Wuhan booster will? What are you even saying? It doesn't even make sense. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. That's the same thing Francis Collin was explicitly the same as well in his opinion piece. He was referring to the same idea. Oh, you remember, we had many coronaviruses, the immunity kind of wanes, but with vaccine we don't really have this. And he cited this one paper, preprint, we didn't even that much supported his main claim.
When you were saying it, it doesn't make sense now, and now it's demonstrably wrong. Demonstrably false. It's not good to lie. You're just saying it. You don't have the basis to say it. Combining vaccination with natural immunity gives you a hybrid immunity, which provides even more protection than vaccination alone, sending your antibody levels to astronomical levels that outpace what you get from two. Of course, the antibodies go up, but what is the reduction in severe disease? We don't know. We don't have randomized data in the group of people who recovered. Observational data is not good enough because the people who've had and recovered and who chose to get vaccinated are different than those who don't. That's not going to be good enough. You needed randomized data, and antibody levels are not what we care about. An antibody is what we call a surrogate endpoint. A surrogate endpoint is an endpoint that patients don't feel, they don't notice, they don't know it matters until a doctor tells them it matters, like an A1C or infrastructure lied, and it wasn't just that they lied, they made an active effort to suppress the opinion of anyone who was telling the truth. How bad is it that not only they said natural immunity counts for nothing, you need the exact same vaccine strategy, even if you're a 20-year-old man who survived COVID-19, you need as many boosters, which just puts you at risk without countervailing benefit. They lied about that. They suppressed social media posts. They suppressed news articles. They pushed a media narrative that all supported the lie. It's even worse, we couldn't have the discussion. The censorship was worse than the lie. They pushed vax on people who did not have high risk and they didn't prioritize correctly. We failed to run randomized controlled trials in people with natural immunity. To date, we have none. All these actions enriched Pfizer and Moderna. They didn't enrich the American people. They impoverished the American people at the benefit of the companies. This administration works very closely with the companies. They don't seem to be caring about the American people. Paul Offit describes the private vote I discussed in the prior meeting where they decided natural immunity would count for nothing. That vote needs to be investigated.
Yeah, he's talking about this meeting which Paul Offit admitted to having in this new video which we watched in the beginning.
Needs to be made public. We need to know all the details.
Yeah, he said, he said he wanted to make all the details public, but then, just so happened that we choose not to.
White House can't be having private votes to discuss scientific issues. People with myocarditis post-vaccine mandates who had natural immunity should be legally entitled to sue whoever compelled them to get vaccinated. I think that's a loophole that needs to be fixed. And the media coverage of all this was horrific. It was brain dead. Media coverage generally has been terrible during COVID-19 because they put politics ahead of science repeatedly. Finally, there's some breaking light because Bret Stephens is finally telling the truth in the pages of the New York Times about masking. The tides are turning.
Well, okay, I agree that they were able to, this whole lie was sooner or later uncovered, yeah, and that's why I decided to look at it first. But now it's important to get the political message right. So I talked about the structure of academia in the previous video, and I want to show you what it tells in this case. I already emphasized that we have, some sort of trendsetters at the top bureaucrats, and tons of normies below them, and they all try to satisfy their bosses. Basically they're all sitting there licking their asses, right? It's just like Fauci, Francis Collins, yeah, and they have to worship them to get promoted, to get the paper published, to get the grant, and that creates tons of this gray area papers like this, which I showed you here, all of this, which were not like exactly wrong, but they were just intransparent about the criteria, the methods, or I would say, no, they were kind of transparent, but the conclusions they were making were somewhat misleading, or they report them in such a way that when it gets to the media, they become misleading, right? That like nobody mentions that reinfection was defined through some positive tests, not actual symptoms. Nobody mentions that we are comparing infection effectiveness for immunization happening 1 year prior versus vaccine received just now. None of the uncertainty intervals are reported anywhere. So of course it's hard to catch them red-handedly, right, on lying, because overall they are not. They're just producing all this sort of vacuous studies, which could be used for manufacturing the consensus. But again, it's already the media job, especially mixed together with a couple of studies from CDC like this, which clearly have this malicious intent. Because otherwise, why would you put out this banner right here, like for the media and for the people to see it and grab it like that without looking a step further to see the uncertainty interval? So I don't know why would you like to have this kind of structure, this pyramid of tongues and asses licking each other like this. And what's the point of replacing top bureaucrats here, like Fauci and Collins and Valenskaya, with Kennedy and Jay? Basically, what will Kennedy sitting on a pile of shit will make you more likely to eat it? Like, it doesn't make sense. These normies in academia, right? They're not driven by the seek for truth. They don't have true honor. They're not real scientists. It's just basically usual bureaucrats. And that's how bureaucracy always looks like. This is collection of this tongues and asses licking each other. You could not make planned economy work. And this is basically central planned economy. You could not make it effective. All this idea which Republicans have, like, oh, we're just gonna clear some DI from it, and that's all. Like, we'll make academia great again. Well, no. Like, in any of the studies here, which I've shown you here, or like the previous one, did you have any DI? No, it's not about DI. Like, DI is just something which, you know, you could find easily, right? And that's why even politicians understand it's nonsense. But the problem is that you have all the studies like this, which has nothing to do with DI, which are written for the purpose to get high in these rankings, to get some hype, to get some attention, to satisfy the mainstream narrative, you know, to, like Paul Offit said, don't jump off the bus, right? Stay on the bus. So my policy recommendation is that government funding of science should be completely abolished. As I already showed you, US government spends like $40 billion on this medical research. This type of nonsense, which I just showed you, is government paid, and all the health agencies should be closed down. All of the HHS, NIH, CDC, and FDA should be completely abolished. I don't know why we should keep people producing study like this on the governmental paycheck, which basically means they are stealing money from us to push us into this slavery by manufacturing the consensus, contributing to the construction of this disgusting cargo cult of science. That's the end of the today's discussion. It's pretty long. I'm afraid it's somewhat boring, but I think this needs to be done because otherwise people don't understand what the true problem is and how to fix it. And I'm afraid that this nightmare, this leftist altruist nonsense could continue for many more years.